Thanks for joining me tonight. As usual, I've got another amazing story for you. This one involves a colleague of mine. He had moved in recently into a home with his wife, and he had heard some unusual, strange noises in the house and little things that couldn't just be explained with common sense. So one night he said he was getting ready for bed and he felt like he was being watched when he was standing in the bathroom. He was brushing his teeth, he says. And, he's looking in the mirror. Obviously, he doesn't see anything, but he says he felt a presence there. So he finished brushing his teeth and he went back to bed and then fell asleep. What I'm about to tell you tonight is extraordinary. It's an amazing story. I've never heard anything like this before. So without further delay, I bring to you the serpent. So, as I explained earlier, the gentleman involved in the story had just gone to bed, felt an odd presence in the room, so he went to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, he said he woke up and, when you wake up and you're like wide awake. So he sat there for a little bit and he looked around and thought, this is kind of unusual. I normally get up in the night and, use the bathroom or whatnot, and I'll usually go back to sleep, he said, but this one time, he said, I was wide awake. So he got up and walked around the room, looked out the window, went downstairs, went to the kitchen, got himself a glass of water, came back up to bed. So finally fell asleep again. During the night, he said he was slightly awoken by a feeling in the room, like a vibration, he said. It was like a very low hum. He said it didn't quite wake him up, but enough that it got his attention. And he said he opened his eyes up very slowly. And when he did, he saw what looked like an aura, or a cloud. And the color of the cloud was sort of a yellowish type of amber color. And he looked at that and he thought he must be dreaming, and he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. A little while later, he said he was awoken again. And this time when he opened his eyes slightly, he saw the same vision, the same apparition, but this time it was in more detail. He could actually make out something slightly appearing inside this aura. But again, thinking it was just a bad dream, he closed his eyes, went back to sleep. So he woke up in the morning, told his wife about it, and she thought, well, maybe you're just having a bad dream, or, reaction to maybe something you ate. I mean, I know personally myself, if I have too much of a certain hot sauce, it induces lucid dreaming for me. So I know that sounds kind of weird, but some foods can have certain effects on certain people. So he decided that, it was just maybe a dream, and he would let it, stay as that. A few days went by, and he had continued going to some meditation classes that he was taking, and felt fine, nothing unusual. Didn't feel anything strange in the house. Then a couple of weeks later, he was in the kitchen washing the dishes. He said, and suddenly he felt like someone put their hand on his shoulder. And he turned around really quick. He thought it might have been his wife, but she wasn't home. She was still at work, and he suddenly realized that there's someone else in the house. So he stopped doing the dishes and he looked around. Walked around the house, saw nobody. Went back to doing the dishes. He was really freaked out at that point. So he's doing the dishes, but this time slightly paranoid and, slightly looking off to the side. A couple of times he looked behind him as he's doing the dishes, and I would do the same. And so he finished cleaning up, and his wife came home a little while later. He didn't say anything to her. And then once they were ready to go to sleep, he was brushing his teeth. And then he started feeling that weird sensation inside of something being in that room. So he's like, great, here we go again. That was really uncomfortable the last time this happened. So anyway, finished brushing his teeth and he went to bed and fell asleep. Sometime during the night, he said he was suddenly awoken, and he opened his eyes really wide, and there, standing right in front of him, is a 6-foot serpent staring down into his eyes. He said he was paralyzed with fear. There was an amber-like glow surrounding the serpent. It was standing on 2 legs. It did not communicate with him through speech, but almost telepathically. He said he was under a spell of some sort. If you recall that movie with the Jungle Book where the young boy sees the snake up in the tree and the snake starts to approach him, and that hypnotic look in the snake's eyes, and the boy, started going into that spell there, I said that's the next best thing he can explain to was that feeling he had, and he just felt like he was under a spell. That was the best way to describe it. And this serpent was just standing there, and he couldn't believe the size of this thing. It was at least 6 feet tall. He couldn't move. He couldn't wake his wife up. He couldn't stand up. He just laid there, paralyzed, motionless, staring into the eyes of this creature, this apparition, was telepathically communicating something with him. Suddenly, what seemed like an eternity, the apparition just dissolved into thin air and disappeared. He suddenly regained his strength. He sat up on the bed and started gasping for air. His wife woke up, all startled, and thought he was having a heart attack. She was about to call 911. He says, "No, I'm fine. I just saw something really strange." And he tried to explain to her as best he could, but she just wasn't getting it. She just said to him, "You know what? You're having bad dreams. There's nothing here in the house, nothing in the room. You're just imagining this." He says, "No, I'm telling you, I saw this. It just happened now." So he couldn't go back to sleep. The next morning, he went to see his family doctor, said he was feeling stressed out, he was having bad dreams, he was having interrupted sleep. So the doctor prescribed some pills for him to help him, like a sleep aid of some sort. And he went home, and remember him telling me the first night that he did take the medication, and he went to sleep, slept like a baby, as a matter of fact, and everything was fine. So he did that a few times and didn't have any more experiences, no more bad dreams. But at the same time, he did not want to get addicted to the meds. So a few months went by. Now he's still continuing to, go to his meditation classes. And someone approached him, he says, at one of these classes and said, "Hey, have you had some weird experience, something you can't really explain lately?" And he just looked at her and said, "Yes, why do you ask?" She said, "Well, I think you're starting to open your mind up and you're starting to have an awakening. Is it possible maybe that you're feeling certain things inside of you arise? Like, are you feeling certain energies?" And he said, "You know what, I did have an experience." So anyway, he told her about it. And she said, "You might have had an experience where they call the Kundalini energy." And she said, she described to him like a coiled serpent inside the energy. He says, "It's possible that energy was communicating with you." Now, Gary, of course, is like, never heard anything like this before. So he took it at face value. So he went home and he was thinking about it and said, "Hey, you know what? This thing did look like a serpent. It didn't cause me any harm." He says, "But when I looked in its eyes, like, it was very peaceful," he said. So I didn't feel scared where he was going to harm me, but I just felt scared because I couldn't move at all. It was like I was under like a tight grip. And he says I could not move, almost like an anesthesia of some sort. So he wasn't comfortable with what was going on and what he had heard. So anyway, he didn't, talk to his friends about it. Didn't want them thinking that they were going to tell him he was crazy or something. So he told his wife, and she said, I'm telling you, it's just you're having bad dreams and stuff. You should stop going to these classes. I don't think they're good for you. Well, Gary stopped attending the classes, and a few weeks later, he said he was at home alone. His wife was in a meeting, so she was going to be home a little later in the evening. So he was by himself. And he said that, again, he was sitting down in the living room, and he said he felt like someone was behind him. So, he would glance back every once in a while, and of course, no one was there. But he felt this energy and this presence trying to get his attention. So, of course, he got up and turned all the lights on in the house and put the TV up a little higher and waited until his wife came home. He says, I didn't know what to do. He says, I felt so scared. He says, I wasn't going to, leave the house. But he waited inside until his wife got there. So his wife came home and, she asked him why all the lights on. And he says, well, I just feel like there's somebody in the house. Somebody's watching me. So his wife thinks that, something's not right with him. So that was it. They decided that as long as he wasn't seeing things, he was fine. But then a couple of nights later, he said he had gone to bed and he was laying on his back, he said. And he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, eyes wide open, wide awake. And there's the same serpent on the ceiling staring down at him.